Hey everybody, my name is Drew Cummins. I am going to perform a live Facebook audit for you all. This is something that I do regularly for prospective clients who come to us with some questions, and then we're able to take a deep dive into their account and provide some thoughts on what we think we could do for their business. So this account in particular came to us with a pretty good structure, but their biggest issue was they weren't able to grow segments of their business and were really not able to grow outside of this current structure that they had. And so I was able to go through and take a deep dive into their account and really start to understand what they have currently done and where we may be able to provide some additional value for them. So as you can see in their build, it's generally a pretty good build. You have your retargeting, you have your Advantage Plus, you have your prospecting, and they're all doing relatively well. When you look at them, they have a 7x return on ad spend, but whenever they try to grow certain audience segments of their business, their return on ad spend, their CPAs, and general engagement tends to fall. So they've only really found success in this setup right here. And so when I dive into these things, I really want to take a look at what's performing well, what creative is working. And so I'll go through each of the campaigns. This one you can see is labeled DPA. So these are going to be all your dynamic product ads that are showing the catalog. So here, I like that they've kept it isolated within one campaign because that allows for the DPAs to do what they do best, which is get in front of folks with qualified products, but it also is not cannibalizing spend when you put it against some creative assets as well, which I'll show you an example of in just a second. So this retargeting campaign is solid, but it is very generalized, and there's no additional segments outside of what their audience is currently. So they have an add to cart website, and they have a save website. So they went to their ending page and saved a product there. And so when we're looking, and when I was pitching them on this, the retargeting campaign is very important, but there's a way that we can scale this out laterally to better understand what segments of the business are actually performing well versus generalized add to carts or things like that. So what we recommended and what we did for this client is in their retargeting campaigns, we kept a generalized DPA campaign, but then we also created additional segments based on their product categories so that we can better understand what is working through Meta and what product categories we should focus on more at the top of funnel. When we look at this Advantage Plus shopping campaign, this is something that is very standard now in the Meta world. But one thing that we are noticing here is that when you go into their Advantage Plus audiences, see that they just have their existing customers defined and not their engaged audience as well. So by having them all within the existing customers, you're not able to understand your audience as well as you could by having them fully segmented out. And this is something that our team does as a best practice to allow that to start to really show in the data. And then lastly, they do have their existing customer budget cap. This is something that we look at immediately to make sure that we are not just hitting the remarketing audience over and over again within another environment. This 20% number is generally solid, but depending on what the goals are of the company, if we're really focusing on new customer acquisition, 20% could even be high because we really want to use Meta's algorithms to find new users. But as we go into this campaign, you can see that the majority of the spend and the majority of the purchases are happening off of a DPA ad, despite having some other campaign types in here. This is something that's very regularly happens in Meta, is if you provide DPA ads and creative assets within one ad set or one audience, the DPAs are almost always going to get the bulk of the spend. But in this case, we found that the average order value for DPAs were actually about $100 less than anything with a static asset. Whether that's a carousel, a video, it didn't matter. As long as it was a static asset, it saw about $100 more in average order value. And so what we recommended for these folks is to completely isolate your DPAs away from your creative assets so that you can fully understand what those creatives are doing, as well as really understanding as well what the DPA ads are able to do and providing those cheap cost per clicks. Because one thing you will notice, DPA ads generally have a much lower cost per click, which is why they will get favored in Meta's algorithm. But if you're not paying close attention to AOVs and to return on ad spends at the ad level, there's a chance that the algorithm can allocate too much spend to these asset types, not necessarily maximizing your efficiency and your revenue growth within your campaign structure. This retargeting campaign here, as we kind of go into it, we start to generally understand and see what they are doing. These two audiences are specific to a couple of their audience segments. So in this retargeting campaign, there are additional audience segments like we talked about earlier, where we wanted to segment out based on where those folks visited in the page. However, you can notice in here, there are no exclusions set up, which are very important when you're talking about retargeting. They're very important as well in the prospecting side of things, but retargeting, these are folks that are very bottom of funnel, and they are ready to, in theory, make a purchase quickly. And so if they've already made a purchase, we want to make sure that we are excluding them out of our audience so that we're not continually hitting them over and over again. And this is a situation where we do not have a purchase exclusion added there, to where these numbers could be inflated by getting past purchasers in there, as well as potentially hurting the brand because you're hitting the same folks over and over again, as opposed to using this as a true retargeting campaign and siphoning out those past purchasers. And then as we move on to the prospecting campaign, they're more generalized outside of Advantage Plus. This is where we saw a lot of opportunity growth. So you can see they've run a lot of different audience types, but they're not necessarily going directly after their audience segments. They're doing persona audiences around them, which are great to have testing in a top of funnel environment. But when you go into the creative side of things, there's a lot of different asset types within there that don't necessarily match that audience. And so when you're doing those very specific audiences and that targeting, you want to make sure that your ads are matching that audience so that you can maximize your relevancy within the ad platform. And so by having one prospecting audience condensed together, you're not necessarily able to see truly where your audience segments are growing within the ad platform itself. And so what we recommended to this client was, let's make a prospecting campaign off of every one of your priority segments or categories on your website. We're going to gather first-party data from each product category, which means we're going to get past purchasers of just that product segment and past purchasers of just this product segment, which then allows us to put more relevant content in front of those folks and be confident that the content is relevant to them, as well as start to truly understand where the segments are that have the most opportunity, so that we are able to truly leverage the data in front of us and scale up in real time based on those KPIs that we've set per product category. And so with that in mind, I can kind of show you what happened as a result of this client coming on with us. So generally performance was good, but they were stuck in a spot that was not allowing them to scale in certain product areas. And so what we did when we took over the account was we identified that they may be overspending just a little bit right now. And what we wanted to do was pull back budget a little bit so that we could get everything into a good space prior to starting to scale. When we closed this client and were able to bring them onto the account, we restructured their account in the sense that we did have prospecting campaigns for each audience segment here. So you can see there's 4 different prospecting campaigns that are designated specifically to that product category. And then we have an additional prospecting campaign that is more generalized, more brand awareness to ensure that we are still hitting the top of funnel for folks who are aligned with the brand. But if somebody is very aligned with a certain segment of their business, they'll get funneled into a different audience. And so as a result of that, we did see about a 20% dip in spend, but that was a planned decrease so that we could bring things back to a more efficient space. But we saw a 20% increase in our click-through rates. Our landing page views actually rose a little bit, about 0.46% on a 20% spend decrease. Our cost per landing page view came down 23% in that time frame. Our purchases were up 35%, and we were able to see specific purchases in those different areas and where we could really push on. And then I believe our ROAS actually grew significantly as well. So our ROAS is 69% higher than where it was when we took over the account. And revenue's up 30% as well, despite spending a little bit, about 20% less. And so this is really a very common situation that business owners come to us with, is they say, hey, Drew, we have a setup, it's doing fine, but we are not growing. We cannot scale. What's going on? And a lot of that is there's a very general setup that Meta has that works pretty well. But when you start to grow and start to get into the $20,000, $25,000 range of budgets, you really have to be able to use Meta to work for you and understand where the mechanisms are that we're going to be able to pull and the levers that we have direct control over to understand how we can impact your business. And so this is an account that the client's very happy with how we kind of turned things around for them in such a short period of time. And now we're actively setting things up to scale through Q3 and Q4 and have a great 2025. So yeah, if you would like to schedule a paid social audit with us today, there's our calendar is right on this webpage. So please sign up and we will find a time to connect with you and audit your account as well.